Hello and welcome to another episode of Dread Skates, or Bikes. I, of course, am your host and number one hub hater, Scott Dread, and today we are going to be taking a look at the Juiced Scorpion. It's perhaps one of the best electric bikes that you're probably not going to buy. No. Hello everyone, welcome back to the studio. Some quick housekeeping to go through before we get started here. So, as always, I'm gonna start off with the specs real briefly here, and here they are. Alright, magical. So, after that, I'm gonna get into what I like and what I think could use some improvement, and then at the end of it all, we're gonna give it a Dread score. No one else has ever done that before. Alright, so let's dive into it with my first favorite thing about this bike, and that is, of course, the cost. So, right out the door, I paid just over $1,800 for this, and this was with a discount code. And if you are looking at one of these bikes, I highly recommend looking to see if there's a discount code available. I literally just Googled Juice Bikes discount code, and I found one for something like $100 off, and that was on top of the deal that they were already running at the time over the holidays. So, and Juiced always seems to be running some sort of deal, so if for whatever reason you see this at the list price of right around $2,000, give it some time, it'll probably go back down. But for $1,800, the features that you're getting for this bike are pretty substantial. Things like disc brakes, the integrated USB hub for charging your phone, as well as front and rear shocks, all things that you might kind of take for granted on these types of bikes, but for under $2,000, hell, under $3,000 is a fantastic deal. All right, so next up, the one thing that everybody commented on when I let them try this bike out was the comfort. As mentioned before, those front and rear shocks provide quite a bit of cushion, along with the rather plush riding saddle. It sits kind of low, but not so low that I find it too much of a problem. They do sell a lift kit as well for the seat if you are taller. However, since I didn't find myself pedaling all that much, it wasn't really too much of an issue. But the seat combined with the shocks just eats up road conditions. Potholes, dips, rocks, you name it, it'll go right through them. Now, I will say I wish maybe they offered to have knobbly tires on this instead of just the street. That might have helped a little bit, like if you were doing some light trail riding like I was here. But other than that, like if you want just like a nice commuter bike, this isn't a bad option. So moving on from there, let's talk about the next biggest thing. And this is perhaps maybe kind of a plus minus, not really. I'm not really sure to call it a pro or a con, but that's the range. So Juiced advertises a range of 50 miles on the stock 13 amp hour battery. In reality, with regular riding conditions, and that's anywhere from, like riding between 20 and 25 miles per hour plus in mode 2 or mode 3, you're probably going to be looking at something closer to 30. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't hit that 50-mile range. I just think that they got that just riding it on flat ground in eco mode. However, for typical use around town, I'm going to say 30. In the city, maybe 25, which is still not bad for a bike that size. All right, so what are some of the things that maybe could use a little bit more polish here? So as mentioned before, you're paying $1,800 for what appears to be a fairly premium bike. So obviously there has to be some corners cut here. And unfortunately, one of those appears to be QA. Now, that's not to say that the components are bad or there's problems with the assembly or the materials. Overall, the fit and finish of this bike is fairly decent. However, one of the things that I encountered when assembling this bike, and if you haven't watched my unboxing video, definitely check that out at the end of this video. There'll be a link, or you can just check it out on the main page. But one of the genuinely, I want to say, infuriating things is when I was putting the handlebars on. So not only was the header clamp misaligned, but one of the screws for the handlebar clamp was completely bent in the socket, and I actually had to replace that. Now, lucky I had a replacement M4 screw for that, or it might have been M3, but most people won't have those parts on hand. So from a consumer standpoint, that combined with little imperfections, little paint chips missing off of the crank arms, and later one of the pedals stripping out unexpectedly, that was really kind of a bummer. Now, my experience in cycling, I was able to work through these things, and I did actually get a service request in from Juice, and they did send a replacement part in the case of the crank arm. So kudos for the service department. However, the out-of-box experience could have been a little bit better. Now, moving on from there, let's talk about the power of this bike. And I keep calling it a bike, and that's kind of incorrect. This is actually an electric moped. It's not really an e-bike. If you were thinking about getting this bike and going out and, like pedaling and getting some exercise, taking it out on the beach, winding your hair, this is definitely not what that is. This is a bona fide electric moped that they put pedals on. And as a matter of fact, if you look into the design brief for this thing, it actually started life as the Bird 1. How do I know that? Because they share the same designer. So, that aside though, it feels like that there's not enough power, it's that they are not taking advantage of the power that they have. Now they do offer the Hyper Scorpion as the upgrade model, which is supposed to have, more chooch, more torque, more battery life, more everything, and I get that. But they could be doing so much more with that 750 watt hub that doesn't even necessarily need a 1000 watt hub upgrade. The main limiting factor here, I think, is the ESC. So when I was riding around and it would throttle up and it would start getting a little bit of go behind it, it just felt like the performance was getting choked at the top end. So I would accelerate, and then when I'd start getting around 28 to 30, it would just start choking down and backing off, which is really unfortunate because this is a 130-pound bike and it really needs a little extra oomph to get going. And I kind of wish that even on the base model, there was just a little bit more overhead there, just a little bit more, torque behind the cadence when you're pedaling. All right, so let's talk about the last bit here, which is the form factor. So as mentioned before, this is less of an e-bike and more an electric moped. And while you might not think about that, you have to take certain considerations into account when talking about things like, where you're gonna store it. And for me, unfortunately, I live on the third floor of an apartment building that has no elevator. But luckily, I have indoor covered secured garages, so I'm able to keep it down there without any problems. However, if you're in the city or you don't have a house with a garage, these are all things to kind of keep in mind, because loaded this bike is basically 130 pounds, and unloaded it's still over 100 pounds, and you do not want to be maneuvering that up any sort of stairs. Even small amounts is just a chore to move this thing around, as well as on public transit. So if you're taking the train, even BART or light rail, it is going to be somewhat cumbersome to maneuver onto those if you're using this as somewhat of a last mile device as well. So just kind of things to keep in mind there. So wrapping it all up here, overall, I think I'm fairly positive about this bike. I'm not really sure how long I'm gonna keep it in my stable. I'm kind of leaning towards wanting something with a bit more power, or maybe a little bit more of a slim form factor. I don't know. We'll see how long we keep it around, but it's been fun so far. And like I said, it is a really comfortable ride. I really enjoy using this thing to go out and get groceries or, you know, do some light trail riding on some of the bike paths around my house. So with that in mind, I promised you guys a dread score, and so here it is. Boop. But as always, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And hey, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. If you really, really like this video, maybe consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Lets me know I'm doing something right and we're headed in the right direction and you want to see more of me. All right, so until next time, stay safe out there, Blade Riders. Peace.